Got the reins for right now. Joined on the phone lines by Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com, recruiting analyst, director of broadcasting. Talk a little football and basketball and just all things going on with the Baylor Bears as we normally do on Fridays around 3:45 or so. Grayson, thanks for being a little bit patient as we were just having some fun talking about the Big 12 and what it's going to look like, and it's just fascinating what we're heading into. But let's start off here with some NBA draft. As last night, Keyonte George goes number 16 overall to the Utah Jazz, giving Scott Drew and company their third straight first-round pick. I saw someone that, hey, 3 straight top 16 regardless. Almost had his third straight lottery pick, just missed that by a couple of spots. But what did you think about seeing Keyonte George going mid-first and to a clearly an organization that knows a thing or two about Baylor and the Utah Jazz?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that I feel like it's a really big deal. And I know there was a tweet earlier today. I think there's 5 schools that have had a first-round draft pick in the last 2 years, Baylor being one of those. And then, of course, like you said, 3 straight years with the top 16 pick. That's obviously a big deal. And I think going into the draft, a lot of people were a little bit nervous about what was going to happen with Keyonte because, you know, if you kind of look through different sites, you would see, you know, some people had him in the top 10, you know, late top 10, like number 9 or 10. And then some had him, you know, potentially falling to the very end of the first round, maybe even being one of those guys that falls all the way to the second. But that absolutely did not happen. I felt like as we got closer and closer to the draft, it felt like those picks, you know, 14, 15, 16, which I believe was Raptors, Pelicans, and then the Jazz. It felt like he was going to go somewhere in there. And I think he ended up at a pretty good spot. And an organization that has drafted quite a few Baylor Bears in recent memory, including Jared Butler, you know, a couple years ago. So, yeah, he ends up with the Jazz. I think it's a good spot for him. He'll get an opportunity to play very early in his career, which I think will be nice, but he'll also get a chance to develop. And that's an organization that had a really nice year this year. I felt like they kind of turned the corner a little bit in some regards. Of course, their end-of-season record wasn't great, but they played a lot better than I think many people were expecting. And so now he gets to be added to the fold. And I think that it's going to be a very nice fit for him. And I'm just happy for him. Another Baylor Bear gets drafted in the NBA, which is great.
And another will be getting an opportunity. But first I wanted to ask you, did you as a Spurs fan have like a Victor Wembanyama welcome party? Like how did you celebrate the foregone conclusion once they had the lottery ball hit on number 1? I mean, this we all knew this was the pick, but how did you celebrate the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes as a Spurs fan?
It wasn't anything too crazy. My wife and I were watching it while we were making dinner, and it wasn't anything crazy. We didn't go to a watch party. I know a few of my friends were actually in San Antonio at the AT&T Center watching it from there, so I'm sure that was pretty cool. But, you know, this year we went to, me and my friends, we went to the NFL draft instead of the NBA draft. You know, you kind of, I'm not saying I regret it, but it definitely would have been very cool to be at the NBA draft for sure to see that. But yeah, great stuff for the Spurs, obviously, getting a generational player like that. It's very cool to see.
I have to say, as somebody who's been to multiple NFL drafts, that I bet to see the number 1 pick in the NBA draft would be fun, but by the end of the first hour, that place had like depleted, like family and friends were still there. It wasn't as much of an event, you know, clearly as the NFL draft was. But yeah, very cool to see him go number 1. He seems like a great guy, and be fascinating to see how he pairs with former Bear Jeremy Sohan there in San Antonio, who was making the rounds as a media guy and doing a great job throughout the night all over the socials and whatnot. So, all right, elsewhere, Adam Flagler does not get drafted. I don't think that was a huge surprise. We knew that was going to be kind of a wait-and-see sort of thing on whether the chips would fall right to where somebody would reach out and grab him. Instead, he does end up signing an undrafted deal with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Your thoughts on him landing in OKC and the opportunity there for Adam Flagler?
Right. I think Adam was, you know, dealing with kind of lingering injuries during the pre-draft process, and I think that kind of set him back a little bit. And I'm not saying that's the only reason that he didn't get drafted, because I would have said it probably was, you know, 60-40 that he gets drafted even before that. But I think in general, when you look at the second round, especially as you get later in the second round, it doesn't really matter if you get drafted or not. A lot of those guys, it's better to just go undrafted and go to, you know, not necessarily, I'm not saying the place that you want to go, but maybe a more ideal place for your career. And I mean, Oklahoma City, that's a group of players that are very young, very talented, and I think he's going to get a great opportunity to develop there. And I don't know how much of an impact he'll make. We'll see on that. But I think they're going to give him a shot to definitely develop into the best player he can be and potentially be an NBA caliber guy at some point down the road.
Is there any way for them to make it 4 straight first-rounders? Is there Jalen Bridges if he plays well enough? Is there a one-and-done candidate in your mind, or are we going to see this very cool school record of 3 straight drafts? And I know compared to like Kentucky or North Carolina, it's not a big deal, but for Baylor it is. And to have 3 first-rounders, 3 top 16 guys in a row, I was thinking about this a little bit last night, but wasn't trying to dive too fully into that. But did you give that any thought?
Go ahead and put all your money on Jacoby Walter being the next first-round pick for Baylor next year. He's a 5-star prospect, the number 9 player in the country coming in. And the biggest thing, I think, for Jacoby, I think a lot of people you're going to see that this year. He's a very, very good shooter. And guys who can shoot the ball like he can, guard like he can, and are a legit 6'5", 6'6", can play that shooting guard, potentially play small forward if he grows a little bit more. But a very well-rounded player who I think is going to shoot the 3-point ball at around 38, maybe even 40% this year. And if he does that, I think he will definitely be a first-round pick next year. He's young. I also think going into next year, a lot of people loved this draft class. You had a lot of guys at the front that many people felt like could be superstars. You had guys in the middle who you felt like could be really good. Next year, there's not as much star power, at least at this moment. And I think that gives him an even better shot to be a first-round pick. But, yeah, I would go ahead and bet on that. I actually think he'll probably be close to being a top 16 pick, which would make it 4 years in a row.
That'd be a pretty big deal. To see how long you can build that streak, and compared to the history of the program, I mean, it's another just little feather in Scott Drew's Hall of Fame cap when you look at the fact that they never had 2 in a row first-rounders, much less now 3, and see if he can't take that even further. All right, to the football side of things, camps have been going on. They had another one last weekend, and you and I talked about that on the podcast. It was a specialist camp. RG3 also had his football academy, but they'll have another high school camp coming up this weekend. But coming out of last week, you did have the commitment of Tidehaven running back Joseph Dodds. Your thoughts on Dodds? And I know that you had teased that you thought this was probably going to happen. I know Tech was involved, and then they landed a running back, so that probably helped. And it certainly didn't hurt Baylor's chances, but Landon Joseph Dodds, what do you make of that for the class of 2024?
Very big deal, I think, for this class. He's 6 foot, right around 200 pounds, had a really nice season last year, 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, was a first-team all-district selection. He runs with a whole lot of power and a whole lot of speed, and that's something that obviously Baylor likes in their running backs. I think he's one of those guys that still has a little bit of ways to grow as well, which is awesome when you look at his vision. And, being in an offense that isn't quite the same as Baylor's is also one of those things that could be an adjustment. But I think when you watch his film, the things that stand out to me are just, again, the physicality that he plays with. He runs extremely hard. The first guy does not bring him down. And then the second thing is when he gets in the open field, he does not get caught from behind very often, which is great to see in a running back. You like to see that burst, but then also that finishing speed to be able to hit home runs. So, yeah, this is a great pickup. He had offers from Texas Tech and Missouri, like you said. Those were kind of his final 3, those 2 along with Baylor, but he also had offers from Stanford, Cal, Houston. So a really nice pickup. I think he's kind of a perfect fit for what they want at the running back position. And they also have a couple more running backs that they're still targeting. So I think there's a chance you could see 2 running backs in this class, but Dodds is definitely a great one to start with.
All right, Grayson, we're a little short on time here, so if you could keep it quick. I know, as I mentioned, there was that high school camp coming up now this weekend, third straight weekend with some activity over there on campus. What's kind of the to-know, summary of what Baylor fans should know kind of going into this weekend and what to expect?
So I'll try to keep this as quick as possible, but Desert Mountain, Arizona tight end prospect, Dylan Hipp, he's a 4-star prospect. He's going to be deciding between Ole Miss and Baylor probably next week coming off of this visit. So very, very important. He's on his official visit to Waco this weekend. Keep an eye on him. The next guy, Evangel Christian Academy out of Louisiana, offensive lineman Tristan Santoro. That's the same high school as Blake Shapen went to, but Santoro visited last weekend for a camp. He's back on campus for an official visit. He's had a Baylor offer for a while, but I do think it's a situation where he might come to Baylor and go ahead and make a decision this weekend. So that's another one to keep an eye on. And then Mansfield Summit linebacker Kylan Reed. He has a final 3 of Oklahoma State, Utah, and Baylor. He's already taken official visits to the other 2. So I believe this will be his final official visit this weekend, and then he'll go ahead and make a decision between those 3 schools. So 3 big decisions coming up. Baylor definitely in the running for all 3 of them, potentially could land all 3 of them before the end of June.
All right, Grayson Grundhoefer, recruiting analyst, director of broadcasting, SicEm365.com. Appreciate it, man. As always, have a good weekend.
Thanks, Craig.
All right, there you go. A little run around.